carbon reporting for larger companies is getting harder. It just is. There's more of it. There's all these different standards you have to comply with. The standards change from territory to territory, and you know what? Most of them are legal requirements. So you can't not do it. You might have the problem that you've got a lot of offices. You might have a problem that you've got a lot of staff. You might have a problem that you've got just a complicated organization. If any of those apply to you, this video is for you. It's all about carbon accounting. It's all about taking all this information into one place and processing it through so that you've got it in one place and you can export it in the different ways you want and view it and make decisions in a sort of a sensible and thought through fashion. If you're a smaller company, probably not for you. Skip on, just press the next button or whatever you do, swipe I think these days. But if you're a large company, multiple offices, complex, lot of staff, this is for you. Tune in, it's all about carbon accounting. If you're a large company, you're going to have to start disclosing your carbon if you're not doing so already, okay? The number of legal requirements, the legal disclosures you have to make is going up and up and up, and there's no sign that it's going down. So I know plenty of pieces of legislation that are coming into place, but I don't know many that are going away. This area is going to get busier. It's going to get more stringent in terms of what you have to do and what you have to disclose, and there's a lot of attention on this. There's attention just obviously from consumers who want companies to be green, but also legislators. They're looking for compliance, and that's because we've all committed to net zero by 2050. These plans that we're talking about, these disclosures are fundamental. They're actually a core part of that plan, just to make sure that companies are doing their part to reduce their carbon emissions down. Okay, so they're the kind of things going on. They're the kind of the way it's going to sort of happen from here. What you really want is a way of collecting a lot of data from different offices throughout the world, multiple staff, multiple sort of reporting time periods as well, pulling it all into one place. That's what Anistic does. That's what we've been doing for like 20 odd years. So we're quite good at it, I'd like to think. And the software we've got will just make that much easier. Before I sort of show you the solution, which is, I think you need both internal governance structures and you need some software tools to make it sort of easier for you. Let's just run through some of the problems, shall we? So the first problem you've got is you've got multiple standards for which read multiple requirements to disclose. Okay, here's some carbon ones. Okay, these focus just on carbon. I've got another couple that focus on different areas, but these are just really carbon related. The first one is, if you start down at the bottom, you've got SECR, which is the baby one. That's a UK standard. It's just for scope 1 and scope 2, and it's really quite straightforward. It's not really that hard. Then you've got all the ones that look at restricted carbon reporting. And by then we start grouping in ESOS and carbon reduction plans, known in the UK as PPN 0621. I don't really know what the European ones are called, so if anyone knows, just let me know. Be interested to know. But it's kind of a midway between the basic carbon and science-based targets, which is probably the majority of, if you're a large company, most of you will be going for science-based targets. The science-based targets are a wonderful standard. I like it a lot. It's very well written, very clear, and just common sense. And that requires, if you look over here on this right-hand side, a complete disclosure of your carbon footprint. Importantly, that includes supply chain. And, that's just mind-bendingly difficult without some sort of tools to sort of make it easy for you. Look at the other ones down here, the bottom one, scope 1, scope 2, and carbon reduction plans, which is the UK government standard PPN 0621, catchy title. Those just look at 5 scope 3s, and they look at the easiest of the 5. They don't get into anything more complex. It's only up here, science-based targets, you start having to look at your supply chain. And I'll give you an example of some of the software tools we can apply to sort of make that job easier. But you are required under SBT to look at your supply chain. You are required to try and drive carbon emissions from your supply chain down, and that obviously leads to that first point, fundamental. If you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And measuring the carbon emissions from your supply chain is not simple, especially if you've got complex supply chains. So we've got this middle band, science-based targets, in here. Again, it's a growing requirement for larger companies. It really is sort of gaining traction, and I'm pleased about that. Next one up from that, you've got TCFD, and if on the right-hand side, that brings in 2 elements on top of science-based targets. I view this as kind of a pyramid. of sort of requirements. As you go up each layer, it gets more sort of onerous. And the TCFD brings in the requirement for you to talk about governance structures. Okay, how is your company dealing with it? So, have you got a committee looking at it? How often does the committee meet? Who's on the committee? Who's chairing the committee? Which experts are you talking to help you through it? Which sort of opinions are you getting to guide you in terms of, advice from your accountants? It also then brings in, this is TCFD, it brings in strategy. It starts saying, well, look, the climate is changing. How does that affect you? What's the good points about that? What's the bad points about that? How maybe there's an opportunity for you to sell more of X, and similarly, there might be a threat that your sales in area Y will be going down, or your supply chain might be sort of impacted if the world keeps heating up, etc. So that looks at strategy and risk. And by risk, we start talking about physical risks, transitional risks. I'll give you an example. Physical risk is flooding, isn't it? I mean, that's the simple go-to risk for physical risks. What's the chances of your operation flooding in, for example, Brighton? If that flooded, what will be the impact on your business? And similarly, what are you doing to mitigate that risk? That's probably the physical risk. Transitional risk could be, for example, we're busy selling 6-litre petrol engines, and we think in the transition to a lower carbon economy, those petrol engines, they might not sell quite as well. And you look at the risks there in transition from A to B, moving with the climate as it goes along. Then you've got at the top here, you've got the new kids on the block. The first one is not, I don't think, is an actual legislative piece, but I can see it going that way. It's a good piece of work. And that's the Transition Planning Task Force. And they've published guides on what large companies should do, what is best practice, and what you need to consider and how you need to set that out. And there's quite a lot in there. It does mirror nicely onto CSRD and TCFD. So there's a big overlap between those three. But CSRD, the European standard, and for people selling into Europe at a significant level as well, that's a lot of stuff in there. That's a big old standard, as is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CS3D, where that starts bringing in all this ESG reporting, which is kind of not just carbon anymore, but you start talking about, it's called double materiality. It's single materiality is what you do to the planet. Double materiality is what, similarly, how the planet impacts you. So you've got both ways, double materiality going on. And they start talking about, social impacts, environmental impacts, what's your pollution levels, and what's your staffing, what's your attitude to communities and stuff like that. These are just carbon. Okay, so these are carbon-related kind of things you need to consider. There's a lot to report in there. If you flick on to product reporting, which is growing massively, 2024 is, super hot on this. At the bottom, you've got LCAs. How much carbon is in your product? And LCAs basically come in all different sort of shapes and sizes, but they can be pretty basic. As you move up the chain, there's regulations in place now for the single use of plastics. We're trying to drive those out of our sort of packaging specifically, but other areas as well. Then you've got the packaging directives. They're coming through now. I think they're drafted into law. I don't think they're effective yet. I think they could be cutting in 26, 27, something like that. But they are drafted, and they're coming your way. Then you've got CBAM, cross-border adjustment mechanism. That means you need to know the carbon content, especially if you're bringing things in from, the developing nations, where maybe their carbon standards and their carbon pricing is not quite what it is the same as the EU. And that kind of just adjusts it as it comes across the border. They say, well, look, okay, you made it over there because it's dirt cheap, but there's a price to pay. And to even things up, there's a sort of a tax to pay as you bring it in. Then you've got TM65, a CIBSE standard. Brilliant. Love that one. That's a really well-written standard. Well done, CIBSE. So TM65, all about, again, looking at the content, the carbon content of your product. So it kind of builds on this. Well, it is an LCA, I suspect, but it's got certain rules and regs slapped around it. It's a good standard. That's especially, TM65 is especially sort of relevant if you're in the construction industry, where without TM65, you're going to struggle these days. And if you go upper level from that, again, specific attention on construction, but you've got environmental product declarations, EPDs, okay? You've got a lot of stuff goes into EPDs. They're complicated, and it starts talking about pollution levels in various different pollutants as well as just carbon. You've got the critical materials down here, which is start talking about sort of if you use unusual materials in the manufacture of your products, or I think it covers all materials in fact, but certain emphasis on certain products, you have to pay attention to those. You have to start reporting them, etc. I don't know much about CRMA. I'll put that on my reading list, so I'm a bit vague on it, but it's heading our way. And then you've got the EU deforestation regulations, which are a complete nightmare if you use paper, if you're a paper-based sort of company, in terms of if you do books, magazines, or you send lots of stuff out or lots of packaging, then you have to source all of your stuff you're doing, all of your production, back to source. And you talk about blockchains, you talk about geolocating which forest it came from. Complete nightmare. Okay, and these are just product ones, by the way. So we've had a look at carbon, we've had a look at product. Let's have a look at the next one now, which is social environment. Again, you've got TPT, CSRD, and CS3D at the top, because do you know what? They do contain social environmental reporting and governance is in there as well. B Corp, I'm working down the list this time, just because I'm just that kind of guy. B Corp is fantastic. I really like B Corp. It's just a series of 200 questions that asks you questions about your social conscience and your strategy, and what have you changed to make it good for everyone, that sort of thing. Great standard. I love B Corp. Then you've got, in terms of social environmental pressures, you've got consumer pressure. These days you've got two different groups of stakeholders. You've got or maybe more than two, you've got the consumers. They want to buy from ethical companies, buy that. And then you've got the whole workforce who want to work for ethical companies. Then you've got the investors, which a lot of them want to invest in ethical companies. Some of them must invest in ethical companies, and the number of lawsuits that are going on, which is this one down here, the legal side of things, is increasing. It's going like that. And this is where stakeholders are taking companies to court and saying, look, you said this, you're not doing it, or you're doing that, you need to stop, etc. And that all rests upon the ground down here, right at the bottom, which is the moral obligation. The planet's not in a good way. We should be doing something about it. And, all of these things that we've been talking about, both social, environmental, product reporting, and carbon, they all kind of point us down in the direction of taking action, okay? And that means complying with legislation, that means making disclosures, that means figuring it all out. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, etc. And that's where we start stepping into the world of, well, how do we pull all this together on one platform? Let's look at a different problem. Let's start looking at the data sets involved. So this is just carbon, right? Okay, so when you start talking about B Corp with surveys of staff and environmental sort of concerns, etc., etc. There's other data sets. These are just the carbon ones. But imagine that you've got these 15 scope 3s that are around the edge, both upstream and downstream. This, by the way, is taken from my book. So Reaches for Book. If you ever want a guide on this sort of stuff, Net Zero for Business, can recommend. Available on Amazon, but it's aimed at really quite the SME size and upper end of SME, not really large. But anyway, this is illustrations taken from my book. But you've got all of these data flows coming in. And one of the problems we see on a daily basis is that if you've got a distributed organization, so you've got, say, one of my clients has got 12 offices throughout Europe, all of which are sort of reporting on all of these data points. That's a lot of data, okay? And you need something to manage it. And carbon accounting, that's what we deal with here. So you've got all of these things coming in, all of these data flows, and the next problem is, as I kind of alluded to, you got distributed user base. So you don't want one person in accounts doing this. You want this to be sort of cascading out through your company. You want good communication, you want good visibility and good transparency of everything you're doing, okay? So you've got this sort of distributed user base. You've got this large number of data points to capture. And don't forget that all this is annual, so all these changes every year. And so the solution, let's have a look. You need a carbon accounting package, and that's what Anistic kind of brings to you. Now, Anistic, we do provide consultant services and support. We can do that if you want, but really, let's talk about software. That's what we're about. If you've got a large company and you want something to pull it all together, all the data points, all the users, all the disclosures, all the standards. We'll take a look at, what I'm talking about in a second, but you really need something like Anistic. You've got one central sustainability data warehouse. You've got one point of truth. That's where all the data goes. Anything to do with sustainability, carbon, social, governance, it's all in there. Okay, we like that. You've got support for multiple locations and multiple concurrent users. So, you can get different people using different parts of the system at the same time. We output to all major standards. So, as I say, we just ran through a few now and there's more coming, so it's a plethora of different standards. But a lot of them, they use the same data in the middle. So the standard might require this, but the core of it is still much the same across many standards, okay? And that's why if you've got one platform with all your data in, you can just really sort of throw out the standard sort of reports and disclosures that you need to do, okay? And then finally, you've got security, traceability, and transparency. You need to be able to say to your auditors, I think this is that because ... And so you need this element of, well, how, you say it's 27.8 megawatts. Why do we think that? And you need to go click, well, that's because of this, etc. So you've got this traceability aspect going back. And again, if you've got multiple users throughout the world, you need security just to keep everything sort of running in the right way, don't you? So that certain people can do certain things, other people can do other things, and nobody can get in without two-factor authentication and stuff like that. Okay, let's have a look at just what the software actually gives you. This is just a broad outline, then I'll just whiz through what a carbon accounting package actually looks like. On the left-hand side, you've got data acquisition. You've got multi-site, multi-currency, multi-time zone, data entry, manual or data import, CSV import, links to any sort of database you've got. You've got surveys. So, for example, commuting is often done with a survey. And you've got, remote apps in case you want to sort of do some things yourself, like energy audits and stuff like that. That comes through data acquisition, a strong sort of security angle there, and then all of that goes into a database up here, sustainable data database, and with everything in one place, you can then obviously just pop out what you need in terms of reports and different views of the data, what if analysis and stuff like that. You can feed it into BI processes if that's what you want to do, and the standards, as I say, a lot of these, as I say, do have the same kind of core data, but they all have their different kind of flavors. And we don't pop out everything, okay? So if you're going to be doing TCFD or CSRD, we can give you the data you need to make that report, have weight and have the right information in it. But you will need to do some, it's kind of words around it. So don't kind of go away from this thinking, well, actually, buy the platform and just press a button, out pops CSRD. It doesn't work like that. They're too big, they're too complicated. But, it does absolutely brilliant at pulling all the different components of CSRD together and putting them out and giving them to you in the right way so that you can then sort of build your report. Very useful indeed. So let's have a quick look at it. Let's have a look at it, watch it go. So this is the sort of thing you should be talking about with a carbon accounting package. This is the Anistic platform. It's, when did we start? 2002, so it's 22 years old. It's had constant development ever since, solid as a rock, and it's generated thousands of compliance reports. So, in terms of a safe pair of hands, it's probably the safest you can get out there. Here you've got the homepage, the dashboard. You've got the different categories of emissions down here with what percentage they represent of your emissions. Up here, you've got just an overview, some time view there, and you've got a team here. So notice that it's not you doing it. It's a team of people. If you've got a large organization, the last thing you want is to centralize this on one person. One person to project manage, buy that. It's a good idea. But in terms of entering all the data, you need to think about having a team of people. And then sites, there's a variety of different sites here. So let's have a look at the sites there. Breakdown of the carbon emissions, all the sites up here, how they compare, and then all the sites down here. If you wanted to, you can zoom in on a site and just kind of like really focus down on what that does. And then from here, you've got everything in one place. All of your gas and electricity is in here. We like that. If you've got a smart meter, you can have a look at the data from the smart meter. And this is talking directly to the smart meter right now. So, there it is. There's the data from the smart meter showing you your base load here. Marvelous. Every time anyone has done this analysis, they've saved a significant amount. So if you've got smart meters, this just talks to them. By the way, we've got a nifty little 3D view of that. It's the same data, but presented in 3D, which is just a lovely graph, so isn't that nice? Again, same data, looking at base loads and base load analysis, etc. But, you can use that to sort of save yourself some money. Similarly, down here, you've got auto import, so that if you've got smart meters, it works with a lot of non-smart meters, but you've got smart meters, suck the data in automatically. Why do you want to go retyping everything? Carbon accounting packages, ours, the Enistic platform and others, talk directly to the suppliers. So you don't have to go retyping everything. What a waste of time that is. So bring it all in. Here's the carbon content and the energy used carbon content down here. Oh, sorry, no, not on this screen. This is the kilowatt hours view of the world. Carbon content, we have to click into here, it's fine. Travel, if you've got a company fleet, what does that look like? In terms of how many miles they do, what type of vehicle, etc. And again, you can view this in sort of many different ways. You've then got bus travel, train travel, tube travel, staff mileage. Let's click on that. There you go, some sample data in there. And all this is like an online spreadsheet. So if you know that in November you did 3,000 miles, or your staff did or Mary in this case did 3,000 miles, type it in there and up it pops here, and it automatically works out the carbon for you here. You can do surveys. So if you want to know about commuting data, the easiest way by a long shot is just to do a survey. I won't click on it now, but it gives you kind of a form your staff fill in, give them a link, they go straight to the form and fills it all in. Or you can split it down by bus, car, train, whatever it's going to be. All the data in there as you might expect. Again, if you've got more data, I'll just type some in here, 300, just pop it in. And September, it's popped in this little bit here, look. It will just update for you. So, it's there. Working from home, again, if you've got people working from home, it works that out. 45 people working from home that day, again, it just adapts it. And again, there's the carbon figures down there. All the carbon's taken from government sources. So, the other problem you've got as a large company is which reference points you use, because they change, they change. And, part of me thinks a litre of diesel should have the same carbon in, no matter where it's produced, but they're all slightly different. And that's because they're processed in slightly different ways. And so, getting the right data set, getting the right carbon factors, again, all part of carbon accounting. Flights, who's flown where, when, with sort of routes, and if you've got, for example, a return to from LHR Heathrow to JFK down there, and let's say it's business class, you can just work out the carbon for you down here. And that's what we're talking about with the carbon accounting package. Can you do it on Excel? Yeah, I suppose some of it you can. I mean, when you look at supply chain, I'm not so sure. But you're really pushing the envelope of what you can do sensibly with Excel. And my sort of analogy is there's no reason at all why you should have to do your accounts on anything except for Excel. But do you know what? You'd be brave to do that. You'd much better buy a package. So we've got waste process in there. Where's the waste going to? Is it recycled? Is it landfill, etc.? And you can just fill in the different sort of waste figures there. Supply chain is where we really fly. Okay, us at Enistic, we've been doing this for a long time, and this is one of our strengths. We're good at supply chain. You need to know that these are your suppliers. This is how much you spent. Okay, you then need to start thinking about, well, how good is this supplier? And how good is this supplier? How good is Energy Fox? So let's say, do you know what? We know that they're making strident efforts and they're in science-based targets. We give them an A star. We know that they're one of our tier one suppliers, etc. And in terms of industry average, let's say they're a cloud storage provider. It's got all the factors in there, and because we've been going so long, we've got a massive database of sort of companies that we can say, if you type one in, there's a fair chance we'll have it on the system already, okay? Supply chain as well, when you start talking about suppliers, you start saying, well, let's analyze them. There's the grades, there's the confidences. Let's just pull up just the tier 1 providers, etc. So you can start to not just say our carbon emissions are this, but looking at the confidence levels of the data you're receiving and the grade that you're giving your suppliers, you can start saying, well, how well are we doing at choosing suppliers that care or working with our suppliers to reduce their carbon emissions down, okay? Other stuff's in there, aircon, biomass, ferries, landfill, etc., etc., etc. But I don't want to concentrate on that. I want to have a look down at the carbon accounts, your footprint. Obviously, you want your carbon footprint. There it is in all its glory, and everything we've just been looking at. It's like, it's an accounting package, but instead of talking about money, it just talks about carbon. That is carbon accounting in a nutshell. Targets, you have to set a net zero target. All of the standards that I deal with, you have to. And sometimes with science-based targets, you notice you've got a short-term and a long-term target. Okay, so you've got two targets to talk about at that time there. But you've got all the targets, and then you've got all the reduction projects down here and what impact that has on your scope 1 and scope 2. So you can start saying, well, I'm aiming to do that. Well, oh my God, if we carry on like we are, we're going to do that. And then you can start looking at those problems and say, well, what are we going to do about it? In terms of that, what are you going to do? Projects, loads of projects in here. 60 or 70, it might be more than that now, but all pre-configured projects. So the projects we can just say, well, if you're this size in this place, ... here's what you're likely to save and here's what it's likely to cost. That's all sort of using our AI system, which we've trained on all the data we've got over the years. Progress, again, financially looking statement about, how are we getting on year? What is our progress? And then, if you've got some carbon you want to offset, you can sort of pull it in there. Reports, loads of them, loads and loads and loads and loads. And this is what I mean. If you've got a standard SECR, you've got carbon reduction, you've got TCFD, you've got ESOS, whatever it's going to be, this just pulls it up. You not only can you do sort of little things like, show me the top energy sites, so you can say which of my portfolio are worse for this, that, and the other, or better for this, that, and the other. But you can actually start exporting to the standard that you have to in the territory that you have to report in, okay? And that's one of, let's just ping that back there just for a second. That's one of the main benefits of carbon accounting. Everything's in one place, it's all traced, transparent, secure, and you can use that with all your locations and all your staff to push all your data into one place so it's nice and safe and secure. And then you can just use that to make decisions, to export, if you want to do further analysis on Excel or something like that, or start exporting the standards, the disclosure requirements that we were talking about earlier. If you remember, TCFD, CSRD, CS3D, etc., etc. Once you've got everything in one place, you're in a position of control. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And what all these carbon sort of accounting packages do, and this must have been going for a long time, they allow you to they do the measurement part. It's like dealing with money, but just for carbon. So there you go. I hope that was useful for you. I mean, several people have asked, what is carbon accounting? And I hope that kind of takes you through the basics of it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Very happy to help. If there's anything you want with TCFD, CSRD, ESOS, SECR, anything carbon related, just let us know, and if we can help, I can help, I certainly will. Okay, I hope that was useful, and I'll see you next time.